Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished fixing the air filter on Level 7 of Nexus Prime. The massive space station spun slowly in the darkness between 3 star systems. It was a place where aliens from dozens of worlds came to trade, make deals, and do business. For Marcus, it was just another day at work. He had been a maintenance worker on the station for 2 years now. The job was simple but important. Keep the machines running, fix what breaks, and stay out of the way of the important alien visitors. Most days, Marcus barely saw any of the strange beings that filled the upper levels. He worked in the deep parts of the station where the real work happened. Today was different. Marcus had finished his work early, and his supervisor had given him 3 hours of free time before his next shift. Free time was rare on Nexus Prime. Most workers spent their breaks sleeping or eating in the small human quarters on Level 12. Marcus had heard other workers talking about something called the arena in the lower levels. They said it was where aliens went to watch fights and place bets. Some of the older workers warned against going there, but others said it was just harmless entertainment. His curiosity got the better of him. Marcus took the service elevator down to Level 3, deeper than he had ever been before. The corridors here were different. Instead of the clean metal walls of the upper levels, these halls were darker and filled with strange sounds. Following the noise, Marcus found himself at the entrance to a large circular room. The sign above the door was written in multiple alien languages, but he could read the human translation at the bottom: Conflict Arena, entertainment for all species. Marcus paid the small entrance fee to a bored-looking alien with green skin and 4 arms. The creature barely looked at him as it waved him inside. The arena was much bigger than Marcus had expected. Hundreds of seats surrounded a deep pit in the center of the room. The crowd was amazing to see. There were tall blue aliens with tentacles for hair, small furry creatures with big eyes, and many other species Marcus had never seen before. They were all watching something in the pit and making loud noises. Some sounded like cheering, others like growling or clicking. Digital displays around the arena showed numbers that kept changing. Marcus realized these were betting odds. He found an empty seat near the back and looked down into the arena. In the center was a circular fighting area surrounded by high walls. The floor was covered with sand, and bright lights made everything easy to see. 2 figures were in the fighting area. One was a large metal robot with spinning blades for hands. The other was much smaller. As Marcus looked closer, his stomach turned. It was a young girl. She looked almost human, but her skin had a light blue color, and her eyes were much larger than a human's. They glowed with a soft light that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. She could not have been more than 16 years old. The girl held a small metal stick in one hand and a piece of broken armor as a shield in the other. She was bleeding from cuts on her arms and legs. Her breathing was fast and shallow. The robot moved toward her with mechanical precision. The crowd got louder, and Marcus saw aliens holding up displays showing their bets. They were betting on how long the girl would last, not whether she would win. Marcus felt sick. The girl tried to dodge as the robot swung its blade arms at her. She was fast, but the robot was faster. One blade caught her shield and tore it from her hand. The other blade cut across her shoulder, and she cried out in pain. The sound she made was not like any alien language Marcus had heard. It was pure fear and pain, something any living being would understand. Around him, the crowd was having fun. Some aliens laughed when the girl stumbled. Others made excited noises when the robot landed a hit. Marcus heard one alien speaking in broken human language to its friend. "Young one fights well. Will last longer than expected. Good entertainment value." Entertainment value. The words made Marcus feel angry and confused at the same time. This was not entertainment. This was torture. The girl was getting weaker, Blood ran down her arm from the cut on her shoulder. She kept looking up at the crowd, as if searching for someone who might help her. Her large, glowing eyes swept across the faces of hundreds of aliens, who saw her suffering as fun. Marcus tried to tell himself this was normal here. Different species, different customs. Maybe this was just how things worked in this part of the galaxy. Maybe the girl had volunteered for this. Maybe she was a criminal paying for her crimes. But deep down, he knew none of that was true. The fear in her eyes, the way she moved like a trapped animal, the tears on her cheeks that caught the arena lights. This was wrong, no matter what species she was or where she came from. The robot was getting ready for another attack. Its blade hands spun faster, making a high whining sound. The girl raised her small metal stick, but Marcus could see her hands shaking. In the crowd, an alien that looked like a giant insect was making excited clicking sounds. It held up a display showing it had bet on the girl, lasting less than 2 more minutes. Marcus gripped the edge of his seat. Every part of him wanted to run back to his quarters and pretend he had never seen this place. But those glowing eyes kept looking up at the crowd, looking for hope, looking for help. The robot charged forward. The girl tried to jump to the side, but was not fast enough. A blade arm caught her leg, and she fell hard onto the sand. She tried to get up, but collapsed again. The crowd noise reached a peak of excitement. The betting displays went crazy with activity. Everyone was having the time of their lives, watching a child die. Marcus stood up without thinking about it. Several nearby aliens looked at him with curiosity. He sat back down quickly, his heart pounding. The girl was on her knees in the sand, looking up at the robot that was preparing to finish the fight. Her eyes found Marcus in the crowd, and for a moment, they looked directly at each other. In that moment, Marcus saw something that changed everything. The girl's eyes were not just afraid. They were intelligent, aware, and most importantly, they were pleading for help from someone, anyone, who might see her as more than entertainment. Marcus knew he had to make a choice. The robot raised its blade arms high above the fallen girl. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the final blow that would end the fight. Marcus felt time slow down as he stared into those large, glowing eyes that seemed to be looking right into his soul. Something strange happened then. As their eyes met across the arena, Marcus felt a sudden wave of emotion that was not his own. Fear, loneliness, and desperate hope washed over him like a cold wave. The girl was not just looking at him. Somehow, she was sharing what she felt. Marcus had heard stories about alien species with mental powers, but he had never experienced it himself. The feeling was overwhelming. For just a moment, he was not sitting safely in the crowd. He was down in the arena, bleeding and afraid, facing death while hundreds of beings watched for fun. But there was something else in that shared emotion. Images flashed through Marcus's mind. A small village with round houses made of blue stone. A family gathered around a table, sharing a meal. An older woman with the same glowing eyes as the girl, reaching out her arms for a hug. The girl had people who loved her, people who were waiting for her to come home. The connection lasted only a few seconds, before the girl's strength failed and the feeling disappeared. But it was enough. Marcus now knew without any doubt that this was not just another alien in a fighting arena. This was a person with a family, with hopes and dreams, with people who cared about her. The robot's blades came down toward the girl's head. She closed her eyes and waited for the end. Marcus jumped to his feet and shouted, "Stop!" as loud as he could. The entire arena went quiet. Every alien head turned to stare at the human who had dared to interrupt their entertainment. Even the robot paused in its attack, its programming uncertain. How to handle interference from the crowd. An alien that looked like a tall lizard with golden scales hissed at Marcus. "Sit down, human. Do not ruin the show." A fat alien with purple skin and tiny eyes laughed. "The human thinks this is real fighting. does not understand that lower species exist for our amusement. Lower species? Marcus said, his voice getting louder. She's just a kid. More aliens started talking. Some seemed annoyed that the fight had stopped. Others appeared curious about why the human was acting so strangely. A few made sounds that might have been laughter. A creature that looked like a walking tree with arms spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. Human emotional response is well known. They form attachments to anything that looks young or helpless. It is a weakness that makes them poor traders. Marcus felt his anger growing. These beings acted like they were so much more advanced than humans, but they saw torture as entertainment. They talked about the girl like she was a thing, not a person. In the arena, the robot had received new commands and moved away from the girl. She was still alive, but barely conscious. Blood from her wounds was turning the sand around her red. A new alien entered the arena. This one was clearly in charge. It wore expensive clothing and had an electronic device that let it speak in multiple languages at once. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored guests," the alien announced. "We apologize for the interruption. The primitive will be removed, and a new combatant will be brought out for your entertainment. Please update your bets accordingly." Primitive. The word made Marcus feel sick. He watched as two smaller aliens entered the arena to drag the girl away. They grabbed her arms and started pulling her toward a door marked with symbols. Marcus could not read. The girl's eyes opened as they dragged her. She looked up at Marcus one more time, and again, he felt that strange connection. This time, the emotion was different. It was gratitude mixed with acceptance. She was thanking him for trying to help, even though they both knew it had not been enough. Marcus sat down heavily, his hands shaking. Around him, the aliens were already getting excited about the next fight. The betting displays were updating with new odds. The girl was forgotten, just another piece of entertainment that had run its course. But Marcus could not forget. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. He felt the echo of her fear and pain. He thought about the images she had shared with him of a family waiting somewhere in the galaxy for a daughter who would never come home. The next fight began. This time, it was two prisoners from a world Marcus had never heard of. They fought with desperation, knowing that losing meant death. The crowd cheered just as loudly as before. Marcus tried to watch, but his mind kept going back to the girl. Where had they taken her? Was she getting medical help? Or were they just waiting for her to die quietly? Would her body be thrown away like garbage, or would they find some other use for it? He thought about the images she had shown him. Her family would never know what happened to her. They would spend their lives wondering if she was still alive somewhere, hoping that maybe someday she would come home. Marcus had seen violence before. Growing up on Earth, he had watched action movies and played video games with fighting and death. But this was different. This was real suffering, real fear, real death, turned into a game for the amusement of bored aliens. And the worst part was how normal it all seemed to everyone else. The aliens around him were not monsters. They talked about their families, complained about their jobs, and worried about their problems, just like humans did. But somehow, they had convinced themselves that beings from primitive worlds were not really people. Marcus stood up to leave. He had seen enough. But as he started to walk toward the exit, he heard an alien behind him speaking in what sounded like a human language. The young female showed good spirit. The alien was saying, "She will recover in a few days. Then we can use her again." The crowd enjoys watching the same combatant grow weaker over multiple fights. Creates a story they can follow. Marcus stopped walking. They were not going to let her die quickly. They were going to make her fight again and again until her body gave out completely. The torture would go on for weeks or months. He reached the exit and looked back one more time. The new fight was ending, and another wounded alien was being dragged away. The crowd was already calling for the next round of entertainment. Marcus walked slowly back to his quarters, but he knew he would not be able to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he would see those glowing eyes looking up at him from the arena sand. He would feel the echo of her pain and remember the images of her family waiting for her to come home. Something had changed inside Marcus during those few moments in the arena. He had always thought of himself as just a maintenance worker trying to get by in a big galaxy. But now he knew he was something else. He was probably the only person on this entire station who saw the girl as a real person who deserved. The question was, what was he going to do about it? Marcus lay on his small bed in the human quarters, staring at the metal ceiling. Sleep would not come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the girl's glowing eyes and felt the echo of her fear. 3 hours had passed since he left the arena, but the images would not leave his mind. He tried to tell himself to forget about it. There was nothing he could do. He was just a maintenance worker on a station full of powerful aliens. Getting involved would only make things worse for everyone, including himself. Marcus sat up and activated his personal computer. He pulled up the station rules and regulations, hoping to find something that might help. What he found made his heart sink. According to Nexus Prime law, the entertainment district was considered neutral territory. Any interference with approved activities was punishable by immediate deportation and permanent ban from all neutral stations. For serious violations, the punishment could be much worse. Marcus kept reading. The regulations were clear. The arena fights were legal as long as the combatants came from worlds that were not part of the Galactic Council. Since these worlds had no official representation, their people had no legal rights on council stations. It was a perfect system for the arena owners. They could capture people from isolated worlds, force them to fight, and face no consequences because their victims had no one to speak for them. Marcus felt his anger growing as he read more. The arena had been operating for over 50 years. Thousands of beings from primitive worlds had died for the entertainment of council species. The station authorities knew exactly what was happening and chose to allow it because it brought in money. He tried to think of legal ways to help the girl. Maybe he could contact human authorities? But humans were a minor species in the Galactic Council. They had little influence and could not afford to make enemies by interfering with other species entertainment. Maybe he could raise money to buy her freedom? Marcus checked his savings account. Even if he spent every credit he had ever earned, it would not be enough to buy a single combatant. Marcus stood up and started pacing around his small room. Every legal option led to the same conclusion. There was no legal way to save the girl. The system was designed to protect the arena owners and give their victims no hope of rescue. But there might be illegal ways. Marcus knew the station better than almost anyone. 2 years of maintenance work had given him access to areas most people never saw. He knew where the power lines ran, how the security systems worked, and which doors could be opened with maintenance codes. He also knew the arena's layout from his visit. The holding cells where they kept the combatants were probably connected to the maintenance tunnels. If he could create a distraction and get to those tunnels, he might be able to find the girl. But then what? Even if he could free her, where would they go? The station was in deep space, far from any planet. There were no ships leaving for human space for another 2 weeks. Marcus sat back down at his computer and started looking up shipping schedules. Most of the ships docked at Nexus Prime were alien vessels that would not take human passengers. But there were a few independent traders who might help. For the right price, he found one possibility. A ship called the Star Runner that was scheduled to leave in 18 hours. The captain was listed as Elena Rodriguez, a human trader who specialized in moving cargo to frontier worlds. Marcus checked the ship's destination. The Star Runner was heading to a system called Kepler 442, which was in the same general direction as human space. It was not perfect, but it might be far enough from Nexus Prime for the girl to be safe. The plan was starting to form in Marcus's mind, but he knew how dangerous it would be. If he was caught helping a combatant escape, he would face serious prison time. The arena owners had connections throughout the station. They would not let an escaped combatant go easily. Marcus thought about his life on Nexus Prime. It was not a bad life. He had steady work, a place to sleep, and enough money to live comfortably. If he helped the girl, he would lose all of that. He might never be able to work on another station. He thought about his family back on Earth. His parents were proud that their son had found steady work in space. They sent him messages every few weeks, asking about his life and telling him about things happening back home. How would he explain to them that he had thrown away his career to help an alien he had met once? Then Marcus remembered the images the girl had shared with him. Her family waiting for her to come home. People who loved her and would never know what happened to her if she died in the arena. Marcus made his decision. He spent the next 2 hours planning. The arena would be closed for maintenance in 6 hours during the station's artificial night cycle. That would be his best chance to get inside without being seen. Marcus studied the station's power grid on his computer. If he could cause a few small problems in different areas, the security teams would be spread thin trying to fix them. A power failure in the entertainment district would shut down most of the surveillance cameras. He looked at his maintenance tools and equipment. Most of it would be useful for breaking into the holding cells, but he would need something to defend himself if things went wrong. Marcus found his plasma cutter, a tool designed for cutting through metal walls. It was not a weapon, but it would have to do. The hardest part would be finding the girl among all the combatants. The arena probably held dozens of prisoners at any time. Marcus would have to search quickly and quietly while avoiding guards and security systems. He thought about contacting Captain Rodriguez to arrange passage on the Star Runner, but decided that would be too risky. If anyone intercepted the message, the plan would fail before it started. He would have to approach her in person and hope she would help. Marcus looked at the time. 4 hours until the maintenance window. He tried to rest, but his mind would not stop working through all the things that could go wrong. What if the girl was too injured to move? What if there were too many guards? What if Captain Rodriguez refused to help? What if they were caught before reaching the ship? Marcus pushed these thoughts away. He could not control everything that might happen. All he could do was try his best and hope it would be enough. He thought about why he was doing this. It was not logical. The smart thing would be to stay in his room and pretend he had never been to the arena. But something inside him refused to let the girl suffer while he did nothing. Maybe it was something about being human. Marcus had heard other species say that humans were too emotional, that they made decisions based on feelings instead of logic. Maybe that was true, but Marcus had also heard that humans were the only species that would risk their lives for strangers. Other species helped their own kind, but humans sometimes helped anyone who needed it, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from. The girl was not human. She was not even from a world that humans had ever visited. But she was in pain, she was afraid, and she needed help. For Marcus, that was enough. 2 more hours until the maintenance window. Marcus began gathering his tools and equipment. He was about to do something that could destroy his life. But he had never felt more certain that he was doing the right thing. The girl's glowing eyes haunted his memory, but now they gave him strength instead of sadness. She was counting on him, even though she probably did not know it yet. Marcus Chen was just a maintenance worker, but tonight he was going to try to be something more. Marcus moved through the darkened corridors of Nexus Prime like a shadow. The station's night cycle had begun an hour ago, and most areas were running on minimal power. Emergency lighting cast long shadows on the walls. giving everything an eerie look. He carried his maintenance kit and tools, trying to look like he was responding to a normal work call. So far, no one had questioned his presence in the lower levels. Marcus reached the first part of his plan, the main power junction for the entertainment district. Using his access codes, he opened the maintenance panel and studied the complex network of power lines and control circuits. He made several small adjustments. Nothing that would cause permanent damage, but enough to create problems. In 15 minutes, the power would start fluctuating in different parts of the district. Security cameras would go offline, door locks would malfunction, and the guards would be busy trying to figure out what was wrong. Marcus closed the panel and moved toward the arena complex. His heart was beating so hard, he was sure someone would hear it. There was no going back now. In a few minutes, alarms would start going off, and station security would begin investigating. The maintenance tunnels beneath the arena were cramped and dark. Marcus had memorized the layout from the station blueprints, but moving through them in person was harder than he had expected. Pipes and cables ran along the walls, and he had to crawl through sections that were barely big enough for a person above him. He could hear the sounds of the arena complex. Voices speaking in alien languages, the hum of machinery, and the occasional roar of some large creature that was probably being prepared for tomorrow's fights. Marcus found the access point he was looking for, a maintenance hatch that led directly into the basement level where the holding cells were located. According to the blueprints, this area should be lightly guarded during the night cycle. He checked his watch. The power fluctuations would begin in 2 minutes. Marcus positioned himself beneath the hatch and waited, his plasma cutter ready in case he needed to defend himself. Right on schedule, the lights above went out. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, but the difference was dramatic. The constant hum of electronics faded to a whisper, and Marcus could hear voices calling out in confusion. Marcus pushed open the hatch and climbed into a storage room filled with cleaning supplies. The air smelled terrible, a mixture of blood, sweat, and fear that made his stomach turn. This was where they kept the people who would die for entertainment. The holding cells were down a narrow corridor from the storage room. Marcus could see light coming from that direction, along with the sound of voices. At least 2 guards were talking in a language he did not recognize, but their tone suggested they were worried about the power problems. Marcus waited for the guards to move away, then crept down the corridor. The holding cells lined both sides of the hallway, each one secured with an electronic lock. Most of the cells were dark, but Marcus could see movement in several of them. The first cell held a creature that looked like a large cat with 6 legs and silver fur. It was sleeping fitfully, whimpering occasionally as if having bad dreams. The second cell was empty, except for bloodstains on the floor. In the third cell, Marcus found what he was looking for. The girl was lying on a thin mat in the corner, her wounds wrapped in basic medical bandages. She was awake, staring at the ceiling with those large, glowing eyes. When she saw Marcus through the cell bars, she sat up quickly, fear and confusion clear on her face. Marcus held up his hands to show he was not a threat, then pointed to himself and mouthed the word, "Friend." The girl watched him carefully but did not make any noise. The electronic lock on her cell was connected to the main power grid, which meant Marcus's sabotage had disabled it. But there was still a manual backup lock that required a key card. Marcus examined the lock mechanism with his tools. It was an older model, designed more for keeping people in than keeping determined people out. His plasma cutter could cut through the metal, but it would make noise and bright light that might attract attention. He decided to take the risk. Marcus activated the plasma cutter and began cutting around the lock mechanism. The tool made a high-pitched whining sound and threw sparks, but it worked quickly. In less than a minute, the lock fell to the floor with a loud clang. The girl stood up as Marcus opened the cell door. She was smaller than he had thought, probably not much over 5 feet tall. Her wounds looked painful, but she could walk. Marcus pointed to himself again and said quietly, "Marcus." Then he pointed to her with a questioning look. The girl understood. She pointed to herself and said something in her own language that sounded like Lyra. Her voice was soft and musical, even when she whispered. "Lyra," Marcus repeated, and she nodded. The sound of her name seemed to give her hope. Marcus gestured for her to follow him. But before they could move, they heard heavy footsteps coming down the corridor. The guards were returning, probably to check on the prisoners after the power problems. There was nowhere to hide in the narrow corridor. Marcus grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her back into the cell, closing the door behind them. The cut lock would not fool anyone who looked closely, but maybe the guards would just do a quick check. 2 alien guards appeared at the end of the corridor. One looked like a walking tree with thick bark skin, and the other was a reptile creature with bright red scales. They carried energy weapons and moved with the confidence of people who were used to dealing with helpless prisoners. The guards walked slowly down the corridor, checking each cell. They spoke to each other in low voices, occasionally laughing at something one of them said. They seemed more annoyed by the power problems than worried about security. Marcus and Lyra pressed themselves against the back wall of the cell, trying to stay in the shadows. Marcus held his plasma cutter ready, knowing that if they were discovered, he would have to fight. The guards reached their cell and shined a light inside. For a moment, Marcus was sure they would notice the cut lock or see him and Lyra in the shadows. His hand tightened on the plasma cutter, but the guards were lazy and confident. They had never had a prisoner escape before, and the idea that someone might be trying to rescue one probably never occurred to them. After a quick glance, they moved on to the next cell. Marcus waited until the guards finished their patrol and left the area. Then he opened the cell door again and led Lyra out into the corridor, getting back to the maintenance tunnels was harder with Lyra. She was injured and unfamiliar with the station layout. Marcus had to help her climb through the narrow spaces, and every sound they made seemed impossibly loud, but they made it. Marcus guided Lyra through the tunnels toward the docking bay where the Star Runner was waiting. According to his plan, they had 6 hours before anyone would notice that a prisoner was missing. That should be enough time to reach Captain Rodriguez and convince her to take them away from Nexus Prime. At least, Marcus hoped it would be enough. As they crawled through the tunnels, Marcus felt Lyra's gratitude through that strange mental connection they had shared in the arena. She did not understand why this human was risking his life for her, but she trusted him completely. Marcus realized that he was no longer just a maintenance worker trying to get by in a big galaxy. He was someone who had chosen to act when action was needed. Someone who had decided that doing the right thing was more important than being safe. They were not safe yet. The hardest part was still ahead. But for the first time since he had seen Lyra in the arena, Marcus felt hope. Behind them, alarms began to sound as the guards discovered the empty cell. The alarms were getting louder. Marcus could hear them echoing through the maintenance tunnels as he and Lyra crawled toward the docking bay. Every few minutes, the sound of running footsteps passed overhead as security teams searched the station. Marcus checked his watch. They had been moving through the tunnels for 2 hours, and dawn cycle would begin soon. The Star Runner was scheduled to leave in 4 hours, but they still had to reach the ship and convince Captain Rodriguez to take them. Lyra was getting weaker. Her wounds had reopened during the crawl through the narrow tunnels, and Marcus could see blood seeping through her bandages. But she never complained or asked to rest. Every time Marcus looked back at her, she nodded to show she could continue. They reached the maintenance access point near Docking Bay 7. Marcus opened the hatch carefully and looked out into the bay. The Star Runner was there, a medium-sized cargo ship with human registration markings. Lights were on in the cockpit, which meant someone was aboard. Marcus helped Lyra climb out of the tunnels. She gasped with pain as she stood up, but managed to stay on her feet. They were both dirty and exhausted, but they had made it this far. The docking bay was mostly empty, but Marcus could see security cameras mounted on the walls. He hoped the confusion from his sabotage would keep the guards busy for a little longer. They walked quickly across the bay to the Star Runner's cargo ramp. Marcus pressed the communication button and waited. "Who is it?" asked a voice with a slight Spanish accent. "My name is Marcus Chun. I'm a maintenance worker on the station. I need to speak with Captain Rodriguez. It's an emergency." There was a long pause. Then the cargo ramp began to lower with a soft hiss of hydraulics. Captain Elena Rodriguez was a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and suspicious eyes. She looked at Marcus and Lyra for a long moment before speaking. "You're the ones they're looking for," she said. It was not a question. Marcus nodded. She was being held as a fighting slave in the arena. "I couldn't leave her there." Captain Rodriguez studied Lyra, taking in her injuries and the fear in her glowing eyes. "You know what you've done, right? You've made enemies of some very powerful people. They won't just let this go." "I know," Marcus said, "but it was the right thing to do." The captain was quiet for another moment. Then she stepped aside and gestured for them to enter the ship. "Get aboard. We leave in 30 minutes. Marcus felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. As they entered the cargo hold, his communication device beeped with an incoming message from station security. "All station personnel," the message began. "Be advised that a dangerous fugitive has escaped from the entertainment district. The suspect is a human male named Marcus Chen, last seen in the company of stolen property. Anyone providing assistance to these fugitives will face serious legal consequences." Captain Rodriguez heard the message and looked at Marcus. "Stolen property? They're calling her property?" "That's how they see all the fighters," Marcus explained. "Just things they own for entertainment." The captain's expression hardened. "I've heard rumors about what goes on in that arena, but I never wanted to believe them." She looked at Lyra again, and Marcus could see anger in her eyes. No one should be treated like that. As the Star Runner prepared to depart, Marcus felt that strange mental connection with Lyra again. This time, the emotion was different. Along with gratitude, he sensed something like hope mixed with determination. Images flashed through his mind again, but these were new ones. He saw Lyra's homeworld from space, a beautiful blue planet with 3 moons. He saw large cities with crystalline towers that caught sunlight and threw it in rainbow patterns across the landscape. This was not the primitive world the arena owners had claimed. Lyra's people were advanced, maybe more advanced than the species that sat in the Galactic Council and watched her people die for fun. The Star Runner launched from Nexus Prime just as security teams reached the docking bay. Through the ship's windows, Marcus could see alien guards pointing at their ship as it accelerated away from the station. "They're trying to contact us," Captain Rodriguez announced from the cockpit, "demanding that we return and turn you over." "What are you going to tell them?" Marcus asked. The captain smiled grimly. "I'm going to tell them that my communication system is malfunctioning. By the time they send ships after us, we'll be in hyperspace." 3 days later, they reached a small trading station in neutral space. Captain Rodriguez had a contact there who could help arrange safe passage for Lyra back to her homeworld. As they said goodbye, Lyra took Marcus's hand and shared one final mental image. He saw himself standing in a great hall filled with beings that looked like Lyra. They were all looking at him with respect and gratitude. Somehow, he knew that Lyra was showing him her future after she made it home safely. Marcus never learns real name or the name of her world. But 6 months later, news reports began appearing throughout the galaxy about a species called the Zephyrians who had suddenly emerged from isolation and demanded to join the Galactic Council. The Zephyrians brought with them evidence of widespread kidnapping and slavery that had been hidden as entertainment. They had technology that could track their missing people and proof of what had happened to them. Within a year, the arena on Nexus Prime was shut down. Similar operations throughout the galaxy were exposed and closed. Hundreds of survivors were returned to their homeworlds, and many of the arena owners faced justice for their crimes. Marcus read about these developments from a small mining station on the edge of human space where he had found work. He never told anyone about his part in starting the changes, but sometimes he wondered if Lyra had made it home and told her people about the human who had risked everything to help a stranger. He got his answer 2 years after the rescue, when a message arrived at the mining station addressed specifically to him. It contained coordinates to a planet in the Zephyrian system and a simple note. "Thank you, friend Marcus. You are always welcome here." The message was signed Lyra, but Marcus noticed something interesting about the signature. In Zephyrian writing, it included symbols that indicated high rank or nobility. The girl he had saved from the arena was apparently someone very important among her people. Marcus smiled as he read the message. He had thrown away his comfortable life on Nexus Prime to save one person, thinking it would matter only to her. Instead, his actions had started a chain of events that changed the entire galaxy. Other humans began to take notice of the Zephyrian revelations. Human traders started refusing to do business with anyone involved in the slave trade. Human workers on stations like Nexus Prime began speaking out against injustice instead of looking the other way. The galaxy discovered that humans had something most other species lacked: an inability to ignore suffering, even when it would be easier and safer to do nothing. This trait, which other species had seen as a weakness, turned out to be exactly what the galaxy needed. Marcus never returned to Zephyrian space, but he kept the message with the coordinates as a reminder. Sometimes, when he felt like his life was too small to matter, he would read it again and remember that even one person choosing to do the right thing could change everything. He remained a maintenance worker on the mining station, fixing machines and keeping things running. But he was no longer just trying to get by in a big galaxy. He was someone who had proven that humans would risk everything for strangers, and that sometimes that was enough to make the universe a better place. In the arena on Nexus Prime, where Lyra had once faced death for the entertainment of others, a memorial now stood. The inscription was written in dozens of languages, but the message was simple: to remember those who suffered, and to honor those who chose to act when action was needed. The memorial did not mention Marcus by name, but every time a human passed by and read those words, they understood the message. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to walk away when someone needs help. Marcus Chum had learned that lesson in the worst place imaginable, and his choice had rippled across the stars to create a better galaxy for everyone.